ADNA Presents. Today, we're very happy to have a voice talent, Sandra Manwiller. She is with us today. Thanks for joining us, Sandra.
Thank you for having me. My
For-
pleasure.
This is going to be fun. What do you love about audio description?
Oh my goodness. I feel like to answer that question, I have to start a little bit from the beginning. So I came onto audio description actually through you because you were invited on a show by a woman by the name of Rhonda Phillips. And I believe her show was called Late Night with Rhonda Phillips. And she had you as a guest. And I had never heard about audio description before. I'm relatively a new talent in the voiceover industry. And you were there to talk a little bit about what audio description is and then sort of have an opportunity to circle back with you if you wanted to do a workshop. So that's kind of how I stumbled upon audio description. Everything about the way you described audio description, the audiences which it was intended for, completely resonated with me in so many ways, even though that I didn't have any experience with someone who was visually impaired. But all the things about knowing your audience, how to describe things, how to describe them in an objective way was so fantastic to me that I thought, I got to find out more about this. So that's kind of how I came upon the wonderful world of audio description.
So, one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that there was a combination of the performance, the technical side, and also it was relatively new to you. Where did things go from there?
That is a great question. So I took some training with audio description with various people. But one of the things I wanted to do was really find out how I could break into the industry and really kind of follow this a little bit more deeply. So I actually had a wonderful talk with you, and you really kind of enlightened me. So just to remind you about that conversation, you basically asked me, outside of voiceover, what is it that you do? What is it that you love? Or what are you doing with your life? And so I explained that I'm a healthcare worker and that I have been in the healthcare industry for more than 20 years, and that I specifically work in labor and delivery as an operating room technician, which is also known as a surgical technologist. And through that conversation, we figured out that probably what I would need to do is just kind of find my own way and create something where you could share what you loved, what you did, what I did rather, and kind of walk people through the process of what is it that I do and use that as a platform for working through audio description. It took me a little bit to think about it, to process it, because the year prior to that, I was doing these video snippets on my phone, literally just doing these like vignettes of this is me wiping down the table, and this is me putting my instruments away, and this is me in the operating room. Never showing, of course, a patient because that's not allowed, but just things that people could maybe find interesting. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to post this on social media. Well, it never got that far. But through the conversation that we were having, it made me think, wait a minute, is there something I can do with this? And so that's kind of how it started. I took a look at all of the little vignettes that I had taken through the past year. And I realized really quickly that one of the challenges of the vignettes was that I couldn't use any of it, right? Audio description is something that you really have to come at it from the beginning. And when I was looking at my vignettes that I was doing on my phone, I realized I wasn't coming with that angle. I wasn't coming with audio description, understanding my audience and being able to write a script. You really have to think about, how are you going to film this, who your audience is, and film it in a way that your viewers are going to understand visually, and also as you're describing these things, these instruments or movements, you have to really take a step back and come at it like that first. And so I really understood what it meant to say audio description really needs to be at the forefront when people are talking about script writing, and not afterward where you're looking at a film and going, okay, well, I'm just going to insert XYZ thing that happened in between scenes. And so that was my challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I remember the first time that you mentioned your background outside of voiceover, I think I screamed and clapped simultaneously. Just I had had a conversation with a friend of mine who had had a baby, two babies actually, and it was that inaccessibility of being in the room after delivery and like, okay, where am I? What's happening? And there was already so much happening just by delivering a baby, but not knowing what was happening that she had literally said, "I wish there was a way." And it's like this was the thing that excited me most was this was definitely something that would not only help your own career and your own goals, but also help others and also the exploration of what you were doing with it. So, with that said, there were more challenges, I'd imagine, and being able to have the idea and go forward. And it sounds so simple, the idea. Okay, yeah, I'm going to add audio description and I'm going to apply it, but stuff comes up, right?
Oh my goodness. So, yeah, absolutely. So, writing the script was just the first part. And then also trying to figure out what would make most sense. So, is it just showing a process of just basically here's a table and these are what these instruments are and this is what this supply is? And I kind of thought, it almost makes sense if I did it by showing the viewer what the instrument is in the order in which it was used and kind of talk a little bit about what it looks like, what the purpose of it is, and walk the listener and the viewer through that chain of events. And then along the way, sprinkle in a little bit of anatomy. And yes, I did say the V word several times.
I was
I
so ready
mean,
to ask you about this because it's the first time in the audio description discussion group that anyone used the word vagina so prominently. And it was beautiful because it's like, thank you. Okay, we're not censoring here.
thank you for saying that. I was a little nervous, I will have to tell you, because obviously, these are sensitive issues that we're talking about,
Sure,
but
sure.
birth and a body is what it is. I mean, these are natural things. People really need to use the proper terminology when you're talking about the human anatomy. And I also would take this moment to encourage people to also teach their children to say the parts the way they're supposed to be said so that they can have an honest conversation with their healthcare provider and embrace their anatomy because it is what it is, right? But getting back to your question, so I decided that what I was going to do is bring all these instruments home. Luckily, I had them in peel packs, and these were things that I could bring home because otherwise, can you imagine? I couldn't cart a whole thing of trays. Somebody would be saying something about that from the hospital. Anyway, so I was able to do that and took a little bit of deeper dive about thinking about what it looked like, what the functionality was, and then it was more of like trying to figure out the sweet spot for balance. So, what's too much? What's too little? And not overwhelm both the viewer and a listener with so much jargon. They're going to be just like, I give up, and maintain a good pace and telling a story essentially, because that's really what it was. So those were really challenging. I hope that I accomplished that people found it interesting. It was quite long. 25 minutes is a long time for a video, but I hope that somebody, if I could just reach one person, that would make me so happy that they would love it. And so I love that you shared that your friend was like, hey, this is amazing. I can't believe it. And why didn't somebody do this sooner? So that just makes me so happy.
Great. It's just great. And thinking about the feedback that you did get, and curious about two questions, if I could. First of all, including blind professionals in the process, any exposure that you had and how things may or may not have changed. And also, what would you recommend for someone else who is going to do something similar to what you did? Not necessarily the delivery room, but their own approach. Any advice you could give? Two completely different questions, if I could ask.
Yeah. So the first one is a great question about blind professional. I actually did not have somebody QC it for me. I will be honest about that. I did not have someone QC it. I did have a friend, however, who works a lot with visually impaired people, and she was actually one of my mentors. And she looked at it and just kind of said, in the background, I would do this differently. But other than that, I think you handled it well, and I think you did a good job. So she did give me a few pointers of things to do to take into consideration moving forward. And then the second thing I would say with regards to giving advice, again, I think that the thing is to really take the time with your script and really understand the audience that you're catering to and do your research, because even though I knew what these instruments did, I actually went back and would research, okay, wait a minute. I remember this back in OR school that it did this XYZ thing, but does it do other things or whatever? So I actually had to go back and research some of my old books. They're literally ancient at this point, but and then just internet search on, am I saying this right? Is this process still, do I have it right? Do I have it correct? Because that is important. Authenticity is important in everything that you do. And you definitely do not want to have misinformation out there because there's a lot already out there. And so you don't want to add to that in any discussion that you partake in.
Another curious question on my part, and this is such an unfair black and white question in the sense of it's too polarizing. So let me try it. You originally created this because you wanted to develop your own voiceover career and to use this as a promotional tool as well as the win-win being able to share this information. I'm curious if you were faced with the choice between using this exclusively for your own voiceover growth versus turning this into a business with other hospitals, joining a blind professional in teaming up and sharing this kind of idea and going in as a consultant, as a business owner and creating this thing. If those were two divergent paths, you could either choose one or the other. Where would you go?
So I will be honest and say that I did not consult my employer when I did this. I did this completely on my own, which is why I say that in the video that these opinions and experiences are my own, because I wanted to be very clear and separate that from them. I worried, however, while I would love to partner with my healthcare employer, I worried that they would take it over and turn it into something completely different and not something that I had envisioned or that I could help with. I just think that they would turn it into a product that would benefit them and not the vision that I would have to help a community understand the labor process and to understand just from an intimate perspective, which is my own, instead of them inserting whatever they want into a production. While I believe that they have the tools, absolutely, they probably have a whole crew that could do an amazing video doing all the things that would make this beautiful film. I don't know. I just felt like I didn't want to have to ask for permission. I would rather just ask for forgiveness as afterward. Would I love to turn this into something else? Absolutely, absolutely. But for this particular piece, this was very dear to my heart, and I wouldn't want to turn this pet project into somebody else's vision because it was my own.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to turn it into something else bigger, but I just don't want somebody a corporate takeover, if you will.
There you go. It's your corporation and your ownership. I get you. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that this film was really cool to do. I'm so glad that it was so well received. I was a little nervous putting it out there, honestly, because like I said before, it was so long. And I was like, is anybody going to sit through this? But I felt like very strongly I had to do it, even though I will say that there were a couple times where I was like, I just want to quit. I don't know how to do this. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing. And so I found myself with the mental roadblocks as well, which I'm sure many of us as voice actors or anything that we do, just as human beings, we always find ourselves overthinking or stopping our own selves. And what I really love is the other part of me that really loves is teaching. And so this was also a wonderful way for me to dive into sort of like an e-learning because I love teaching and I have mentored many people in my workplace and have gone on I've done some speaking engagements with an organization that I'm involved in. So I hope that it came across as an engaging and entertaining and, that you learned something, because that's ultimately what I wanted was people to walk away with, like, tools that they would go, "You know what? Now I understand," or, "Wow, I didn't know this thing did this," or, "I didn't even know you used that," or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I found it to be great fun.
Very cool. Oh, thanks so much for sharing that, Sandra. That's so cool. It's really fun to hear like your own process too and your own journey and how that continues. If you were to do another project, would you include a blind professional if there's a part two or a separate thing?
Yes, I do have an idea in my mind already since I've finished doing this. I don't wanna divulge yet.
It's
I'm
your
still in the
secret.
yes, I'm still, working on the script in my brain, but I have to write it down, but I already have this idea that I wanna do. Yeah, I do need to involve a blind professional, absolutely, because it's an obvious win, right? That it has to make sense. Again, if you're trying to understand your audience, it has to make sense to the person that you're, trying to reach out to. So I have to absolutely reach out to someone, and I may have to come around to you to see, maybe you have some suggestions. I'm sure you have just a few people that you might suggest.
It's just opinions.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Really great talking to you. How can we follow you? Social media? Where can we find this video? How do you like to share publicly your how to reach you?
Yeah, yeah. So I am my website is sandramanwiller.com, and I am on Instagram at sandramanwiller_voiceover. And I'm also on Twitter. The YouTube channel that I have literally just only has that. And so you can absolutely watch it if someone hasn't seen it and if this is all new to you. And it's again my name, Sandra Manwiller.
Very great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor.